I'm Father Michael Orsi. I'm your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which brings you the big G, the gospel of Jesus Christ, and little g, all the good things that people do to put that gospel of life into action. You may have heard there has been some changes in Washington, D.C. of late, which I think I would be safe to say makes pro-life work a little more difficult. Now, we do have some very, very brave and bright people who are willing to go to bat for the unborn and to go to bat for religious freedom, to protect the freedoms of especially the churches regarding legislation which might force them or try to force them to do things which the churches consider to be immoral. Now, one of the groups that we have fighting for pro-life and for religious freedom, we have a wonderful committee at the National Right to Life. And we have with us today Jennifer Popik, who is the Legislative Counsel for the National Right to Life Committee. Now, Jennifer, you certainly have your work cut out for you with the change in regime that has taken place in Washington. The former administration was, for the most part, very pro-life, very protective of religious freedom. Well, let's put it this way. The Senate is now 50-50, plus one, and that would be the vice president who leans toward a pro-choice position. We have Congress, and Congress has, well, I think 222 people who might be somewhat, well, a great deal pro-choice, and we have 211 Congress people who, well, I think they might be considered pro-life. Maybe. But you would have the numbers better than me. And then, of course, the executive branch with the president and vice president, they have talked openly and frequently about expanding abortion rights and limiting religious freedom. So, you know, Congress, Senate, presidency, and you have to take them all on. Now, how are we going to do this?
Well, certainly in my tenure at National Right to Life, we faced this sort of scenario before. I was a relatively new employee when the Obama administration came in, and they came in, with this full kind of swing, controlling all three branches. And so what we do is we have to be vigilant, and we understand there are certain things that do come and go. For example, I hope a lot of your listeners have heard of the Mexico City policy. And what that is that it's a policy in the United States started under President Reagan, where we don't fund international efforts when they're done to fund abortion directly, or to lobby to change the laws of a country to be more permissive on abortion. And so this is one of these things that we make sure that international money during a pro-life administration, such as Reagan, such as both Bush's and the Trump administration, has made sure this money goes to groups that don't, do abortions and don't promote abortion as a method of family planning and don't lobby the host nations. That's something that we do lose, that we have lost during the Clinton years, during the Obama years, and we expect that'll be a quick action from the Biden administration. We know that all we can do is highlight that these bad sort of international groups are getting money, or
so that's like a done deal. These international groups are going to get money as soon as the president signs off on it and says that's the end of it, and that's gone. Mexico City policy is gone until maybe a new administration comes. The new president can just say the Mexico City policy is ended. I'm going to supply international funds for abortions.
Yeah, and that's something that we anticipate that they will do in fairly short order. The Obama administration did it within their first 3 days. We expect, Biden, as part of the, a holdover from that time, to do it again very quickly. The fights in Congress will be different. A lot of these actions that President Biden will take. Okay,
let's talk now about the Hyde Amendment. That's another policy, if you will, that is in danger under the new administration, correct? Tell us what the Hyde Amendment does or is.
Congressman Henry Hyde from Illinois had the notion that to investigate were Medicare dollars, Medicaid programs for the poor, were those dollars being used to fund abortion? And they were, at the clip of about $300,000 a year. So starting in 1976, that every time Congress passes a budget, it's what's called a limitation or a rider. And so the Hyde Amendment is attached then to every yearly funding bill since the 1970s. And according to a lot of the data out there, it saves something along the lines of about 2.4 million lives at this point. So what it says is that in healthcare funding, in the labor HHS bill, the healthcare funding that is part of the yearly budget, money that goes to states for Medicaid programs, for all different kinds of things, that this money cannot be used to directly fund abortion. And it's been a life-saving policy. It's been very, very popular, in terms of polling data among the American public, and it saves lives each and every year. We know that Nancy Pelosi and other leaders in the House have expressed a desire to eliminate that rider this year. So we'll be dealing with a current budget. This has sort of got a lot of attention when the stimulus was passed. Everyone got their $600 checks. That also passed with a budget that goes for a year.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question here. Now, certainly we talked about the Mexico City policy, and again, that's executive order, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so one administration comes in, pro-life, okay, Mexico City policy. New one comes in, not pro-life, goodbye Mexico City policy. Is it just as easy now to get rid of the Hyde Amendment, executive order?
No, this will be a more complicated process. There's things that the Biden administration can do to try to, take away conscience rights, to make sure more people get abortions. But in terms of this direct funding, that's up to Congress. And we don't, we're going to make a good fight in the House, and the Senate is 50-50. And the good news is that you need 60 votes in the Senate currently to pass these kinds of things. And we do not, we want to make sure that there's not 60 votes to get rid of the Hyde Amendment. And this is something that we think is, as long as they keep the rules on the filibuster intact.
Oh, that's a big one, isn't it? As long as they keep the rules. I mean, it seems to me that a lot of these folks, they kind of manipulate the rules. And that way they can get what they want. So talk is that they want to eliminate the filibuster. Then you're down to 50. So we could be in big trouble regarding the Hyde Amendment too. And what's to stop them from implementing the rule that you no longer can have a filibuster?
Right now, you sort of beat me to the punch there. If they get rid of the filibuster, all bets are off. You only need 50 votes. I suppose what we would have to count on is there are a small handful of pro-life Democrats, like marginally pro-life Democrats in the Senate that have supported the Hyde Amendment. I think Joe Manchin likes to pop to people's mind. And even, the Republicans are fairly pro-life. There's a couple of ones that, don't always vote pro-life, but they have tended to be in favor of the Hyde Amendment. You would absolutely need to hold every Republican, plus another, one or two just for good measure. What's to stop them? I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of senators that have been there a long time and appreciate the history and the tradition of the Senate needing 60 votes. So, right now, it's not clear if there's enough votes. You just need a simple majority to change the rule. There's not clear there's enough votes to get rid of the filibuster.
Okay, so my question now is this.
Yeah.
My question now is this. Suppose they do. What are you going to do? You have, this National Right to Life Committee. You are the legislative council. What do we do? Are we helpless in this situation? I mean, it seems like the cards are stacked.
We're never helpless. There's an election every 2 years. And that's, I think we need to make very clear as pro-lifers, we want there to be this clear delineation that look at your member, look at how they ran. Did they run as a moderate? And then hold them accountable for their votes. So that's what we do at National Right to Life. And I think we're going to fight to win here. We're not just going to fight in this Congress. We're going to fight to win. I think that there's so many policies that are so popular among even people who are only a little, marginally pro-life, or they're pro-choice, but you know what? Government funding is a different thing to them. So what we're going to do is build on common sense majorities. We're going to apply all the pressure that we can muster, from people in the states, in our state groups. And we plan to fight to win on some of these battles. We know there's things we'll lose with the administration, but we think we can really fight to win on Congress. The majorities of Democrats are so slim. So this is something, all we have to do is, keep the abortion issue alive in this fight on Hyde, and then other things that are going to come across the.
Okay, so it seems to me though that the battle has to be waged more on the local level at this point to get the changes that we need in Congress if elections are going to be free elections, and if the media presents our side, which we have not been very successful in having the media do. I'm talking about mainstream media. And at this point, we're also being censored by social media. This is a huge battle, and it certainly seems that we're outnumbered in this battle. Could you tell me, are you going to try to engage the churches? I think it's a spiritual battle. I really do. Of course, I'm saying, well, he's a priest. What do you expect? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a spiritual battle. This is like, David against Goliath. You hear what Jennifer is telling us, the situation in Washington as to what can happen. And let me tell you something, folks. Not can, it will happen. It will happen. We're fighting a battle against evil. Now, we need people like Jennifer, the National Right to Life Committee, to help us in this battle. But I think you're going to need some natural allies. And those natural allies are going to be the churches. And what are you folks doing at the grassroots to say to the churches, hey, talk to your people about what's going on?
What we do is we send out information to churches and try to engage where we can. This has been a very unusual year. What I'm happy to see is there's been really tremendous leadership at the top of, if we're talking about the Catholic Church here, the Catholic bishops and other churches. I think there's been a lot of engagement because they're quite aware of what's going to happen in terms of conscience protection, of the rights of, people of faith and even of conscience, to say, I don't want to participate in abortion, to say, I don't want to participate in these sorts of programs if they're going to fund abortion. So what are we going to do is we're going to, through our state affiliates, through our chapter system, to keep you alerted as these fights, sort of appear. And I'm happy to see that the Catholic Church has taken a very, very strong position on the Hyde Amendment, making it their top legislative priority this year. So I know they don't, score votes, and they have lots of relationships on all sides of the aisle. So I'm happy to see that people of faith are incredibly engaged. I feel the frustration of not being able to get information. So what I'd recommend is to get on lists of groups like ours, and that way, and get on, there's daily news services from us and groups like ours, and to keep as informed as you can. Social media is going to be tough, I think, for these next bunch of years. So to get on email lists, to
I think, ladies and gentlemen, I'm being honest with you. I've never lied to you as my audience. When things are going good, I'll tell you things are going good. When I see, light at the end of the tunnel, I'll tell you there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Folks, I see a train coming. I see a train coming at the moment, not just regarding abortion, although that is the underlying issue. As I told you many times, it is one of those wedge issues. You push abortion, and that way you can get away with practically anything that has to do with life and the sacred and a moral code that's directed from God and not from human beings who decide that they want to be God. And then all our lives are in jeopardy. Now, I bring this up, and I'm going to ask Jennifer about this too. Jennifer, all right, so we're saying that, Mexico policy, goodbye for now. Hyde Amendment, well, we'll try to maintain that. But Jennifer, what about when we get to something like the Little Sisters of the Poor and their religious freedom, their conscience that they don't want to supply abortion and abortifacients and contraceptives in their policy for health care for their employees? And what's going to happen with that? As far as I know, the administration says we're going to bring them back to court.
Yeah, you're completely right. It's going to be a new set of legal battles. And here's the encouragement I would give on this front. Now, while the Trump administration was just unequivocally one of the most pro-life administrations that's existed, and they really focused on conscience rights, and we expect there to be a big reversal there. What has happened over the past 4 years quietly, and then less quietly, was, there's been 200 judges put in place across the country, replacing Clinton-era judges, replacing even in some cases, Carter administration judges. So judges that have a lifetime appointment in the district and circuit courts. And these are judges that view, the Constitution in a more, in a way that will end up, we believe, protecting these conscience rights and upholding conscience laws in states or pro-life laws in states. And then we have a very different Supreme Court now than we did 4 years ago. It's very unusual a president would get to appoint 3 judges, and one of which was a switch from Ruth Bader Ginsburg, longtime liberal stalwart, to someone we believe will interpret the Constitution differently.
As you can imagine, producing this wonderful program, Action for Life, it costs a great deal of money. We're going to need your help. So if you would like to donate to keep this good news program on the air, please go to your computer, your cell phone, actionforlife.net. Thought for the day. Our country is going through a tumultuous time. Many people are questioning the very foundations upon which this country has been built. One of the foundations that people are often forgetting is that this country was built on biblical principles, on justice and righteousness, and also upon charity. So much so that our founders had engraved on top of the rotunda of our Capitol in Washington the words of the prophet Micah. Remember, man, do what is right, love justice, and walk humbly with your God. Let me ask you this, another concern. What about stacking the court? You think that's going to be attempted?
This is something we'll fight with everything we've got, but we do believe that, we have to hope that there's a lot of those in the Senate who don't view their role as, of this moment, but as a historical body. And so, with the margins being so slim, it would only take one Democrat senator to say, no, I respect the institution so much. So the pressure is going to have to come through calls, through contact from people like your viewers, from people of faith and conscience out there in the country. Get on alert lists, and when the time comes, we're going to have to flood these offices with our calls and our letters, and really push them that we want the Senate to stay deliberative.
All right, now I want to ask you about this so-called Equality Act. And to me, this is, again, it's a very dangerous act because it's going to impose on religious organizations people with attitudes that do not speak to our conscience regarding biblical precepts and regarding what we consider the respect for the natural law. And could you talk about this Equality Act, which I'm told has already passed Congress? Yes?
Sure, it passed last Congress. So it would have this. We're in the new Congress now. So it did pass the House only last Congress, and so it would start from scratch again here. And there's a lot of at National Right to Life. We just take a position on the right to life issues, but this does have broader implications, like you say, on gender and sexual identity. And what it would do, this piece of legislation, is for the first time, it would add all kinds of new classifications into the Civil Rights Act, the wonderful and important Civil Rights Act. And so what we're concerned about is that it adds sex for the first time, and then gender-related conditions, which has been interpreted to include, pregnancy and therefore abortion. And when you put that kind of language into the Civil Rights Act, what it happens is that in places of public accommodation that it's referred to, you can't discriminate against someone. So all of a sudden, you have pregnancy and abortion being a protected class, like race or something like this, like as important to you as, as a civil right. And then that means that people in the public space can't discriminate against you.
Right,
and
now,
while that sounds great,
Jen, I want to ask you further question regarding this would go back to 1964 and reinterpret the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which applied to men and women. And, now it applies according to Justice Gorsuch in Bostock. It applies to LGBTQ, whoever. I mean, he was supposed to be a originalist, a textualist in the Constitution. What do we do with this?
I feel your frustration on that Supreme Court case. It was, one that ultimately didn't decide further things that it could have. It ended up being, as I think devastating it is to certain groups. I think that this Equality Act goes so much further than that Supreme Court case does. So while, I think it was a disappointment to many people who believe natural law and want to have the right to say who they hire and who they treat and things like that in terms of, being in alignment with their Christian mission. I think that was a relatively narrow piece of everything the Equality Act seeks to accomplish. That was in an employment context. The Equality Act will also force the same sorts of things into a healthcare context, on gender issues and on abortion. And so that'll mean anyone who pays for healthcare or anyone who provides healthcare is going to lose all their conscience rights. And so I think, while that case was a disappointment, it was narrow. And I think we're right to discuss it because the Supreme Court can always revisit these things later. The Equality Act will go so much further.
I am terrified as to what is happening to our government and to our society, Jen. We're counting on folks like you. I mean, you're going to be like a Joan of Arc out there. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, hard times are upon us. As I said, I never try to shy away from telling you the truth. We've talked with Jennifer about all of the problems, all of the obstacles that are in the way of the pro-life movement. And when we talk about pro-life, look, we have to talk about religious freedom too. You really can't have one without the other. We are depending on you, Jen, to guide us. How are we going to rally our people to vote the right people into office? And maybe if we can't stop it immediately, at least when the next Congress is elected, that we'll be able to turn back some of these advances against life and advances against religious freedom. I encourage people. You know, we have a lot of smart people out there. You know, Jen is one of these smart people. She has a lot of great people working on the National Right to Life Committee. The best solution we have right now is prayer. We're going to need a lot of people praying out there that people like Jen are able to do the right thing and to turn back these forces of evil. This is evil. And we have some people who consider themselves devout, and they are the perpetrators of this evil. The devil is having a field day, and let me just tell you this. As I said, it looks like doom and gloom. For the present moment, yes. However, I assure you that Jesus is in charge, and that there is light in the darkness, and that Christ will conquer the evil of this world. Jen, I want to thank you for being with us. I could talk to you, I could just go on talking to you. You're very bright. You have all the facts lined up. But this is a supernatural battle. And I want you to know that you're in my prayers. And folks, keep her in your prayers too. I'm for action, and I know you are too. God bless you. We would like to thank our generous sponsors for their wonderful support. Thanks for watching. Please join us next time for Action for Life. I'm for action, and I hope you are too. I'm Father Michael Orsi. I am your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which talks about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the big G, and the little g, all the good things that people are doing to put the gospel of life into action. So please join us for the next episode of Action for Life.